about that. All right. We are working as a collaborative with the initiative. So we have Wildlands Trust, which is the organization that I work for. We are the Southeastern Massachusetts nonprofit Conservation Land Trust. We're working very closely with the city of Brockton, who owns and manages the park itself. We're working very closely with the town of Avon, who hosts the northern part of the park, right around Waldo Lake. The park juts into the town of Avon. We're working with Old Colony Planning Council for environmental, recreation, and transportation planning and outreach. We're working with the DW Field Park Association, the nonprofit volunteer-run friends group for the park. We're working with environmental partners who are engineer and planning partners for stormwater management and who put this beautifully designed master plan together for us. We're working with Manomet Conservation Sciences. They're an advocate for environmental education and climate change science, and they've done also some habitat surveying out of the park. We have the Conway School, which is a graduate school for sustainable landscape planning and design. We'll talk a little bit about them today. And then the Fuller Craft Museum is a park adjacent nonprofit art museum that shares some waterfront real estate with the park on Upper Porter Pond. Today's presenters include some representatives from the initiative partners that I just spoke about. So my name is Rachel Bruce. I work for Wildlands Trust. I'm the chief of staff here. Scott, I will let you introduce yourself next.
Sure. My name is Scott Turner. I'm Director of Planning and a Principal at Environmental Partners, focusing mostly on stormwater management.
Thank you, Scott. And we have Joanne Zygmunt.
Hi, folks. Joanne Zygmunt from Old Colony Planning Council. We're the regional planning agency for the greater Brockton and Plymouth areas. Our role really has been to help with the public participation components of the project. And we also have Mary Waldron, our executive director, on here as well today.
Great. Tim Carpenter was not able to join us today, but he will be at the meeting next week if you want to meet him in person. He is the superintendent of parks for the city of Brockton, and we've been working with him closely on this project. And we also have Sam Butcher.
Hi, yep, I'm Sam Butcher. I'm working with Wildlands Trust as a consultant. I'm coming off a career in the contamination space, and I'm looking forward to working on a clean project.
Great. Thank you all. So our vision for DW Field Park starts off with the concept that great parks make great communities. The DW Field Park Initiative is a partnership, as I mentioned, working to restore the health and splendor of DW Field Park. We envision a revitalization that will promote and improve recreational opportunities, accessibility, environmental health, and climate resiliency. And if you've looked at the master plan, some of these pages might look familiar. A lot of these graphics on the slideshow today are pulled directly from that master plan, which is available in its entirety on our website. With the park being so large, about 700 acres, we decided early on to divide our planning up into phases. So this master plan that we're talking about today is just for phase 1, which is the middle section of the park. We decided to focus here because it's the most heavily used area of the park for recreation. And it goes between Oak Street in the south, which is in Brockton, all the way up to South Street in the north, which is in Avon. Phase 2 for planning, which has already begun and will go on for the next few years, will focus on that northern area of the park up around the Brockton Reservoir. And then phase 3 will focus on the southern area of the park, which goes from Oak Street to Pleasant Street. We also wanted to mention that the DW Field Golf Course is not included in the master plan because it is managed separately, although it is technically a part of the park. They both contribute to each other. So we just wanted to make sure everybody knew we're not talking about the golf course today, but it is a part of the park. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Joanne to talk a little bit about the planning process that we've undergone so far.
So the planning process for this project has been really collaborative. We've spent about 2.5 years doing all sorts of stakeholder and community engagement and participation activities. The field work that has been kind of a vast data gathering exercise really included a habitat survey looking at what birds were in the park and where. We had Old Colony Planning Council do some traffic data gathering, looking at vehicle patterns. We had stormwater analysis done, looking at how stormwater moves through the park and where areas of improvement might be needed to help protect water quality, but also improve safety for the park. We had some students from Brockton doing a waste management audit, looking at where the waste baskets in the park are, the waste bins, trash cans, where we might need more of them, how waste in general is managed within the park. We did some work with public transportation and the BAT bus folks who actually, through the work involved in this project, installed a really great looking canopy for the BAT bus station that is now just outside this part of the park on Oak Street. There was an walk audit done with Walk Massachusetts, looking at safety for pedestrians in the park and where areas for improvement would be necessary. We worked with Manomet. They secured a federal grant to map heat, not just in the park, but actually all across Brockton, Avon, and Abington. So they had heat monitors attached to their cars, drove around the city, and produced a heat map that very clearly shows, you can see on the website, the area of the park, bright blue among sort of a sea of red. So the heat being very high outside areas of the park, and the park itself being essentially a cooling center and a cool recreation area for people in the city and the surrounding towns as well. Wildlands has been working with students in Brockton through their Green Team program. They have done lots of work, both in terms of gathering data, but also just park improvement type work, like building birdhouses and bat boxes and such, for not just this summer, but every summer. I think this was year 3. And then of course the Conway School, their landscape architecture school, graduate students were involved in the development of this plan and in much of the data gathering too. We did a lot of outreach through the process as well. It began with a community survey where we received, I think it was somewhere around 1,300 or so responses from folks in Brockton, but also in the neighboring towns. We asked them what they loved most about the park, areas that they thought needed improvement, what their aspirations were for things that they'd like to continue doing or see the ability to do in the park. And that really informed the rest of the process. There was a steering committee, which was made up of the partners that Rachel earlier on described to you, as well as some community representatives. The steering group met on a regular basis to oversee the whole process and review all the results that were coming through from these fieldwork and data gathering exercises. We also held interviews both with folks that were just out and about in the park, as well as folks who were very familiar with issues in the park. And we are now having these public meetings, which will really be the wrap up of the whole process. So there's this one today. We have another one on Tuesday evening at the Greek Orthodox Church. And what comes out of these 2 meetings will be fed back into the report. And then we hope, well, I'll leave it to Rachel to talk about what happens next. So I'll keep you on the edge of your seats until we get to that part. And then the next steps. Oh, I thought you were going to present this slide, Rachel. Sorry, that's me still.
I was gonna say, it's actually still you, so go for it.
It's actually still me, I'm going for it. So the public comment period closes on August 5th. As Rachel mentioned, you can send through your email comments directly to the DW Field Park Initiative for consideration by the steering committee. You've got until August 5th to do that. You can feed in at the meeting today, as well as at the meeting next Tuesday. And then once all of that is gathered together and the draft is complete, it will be presented both to the Brockton City Council as well as to the Avon Select Board for, hopefully, for adoption by both the city and the town sometime during fall 2024. The plan going forward from there, once it is adopted by both municipalities, will be to work together to apply for both grant funding, so federal and state funding, as well as private funding from foundations and other philanthropic organizations to implement the projects and the ideas that you see in this plan. And then alongside that, we'll be moving on to planning efforts in the northern part of the park, as well as in the future to the southern part. So it'll be, probably, a good 5+ years of work that will continue on from today to try and get things moving. And now I'll pass it over to Scott.
Thanks, Joanne. So as part of the master plan, we had three separate goals there. We struggled a little bit with all three of them simply because everything on this plan is interrelated. So our three goals are improve environmental resilience, 2, upgrade the user experience, and 3, expand community opportunities. Next slide. So improve environmental resilience involves a lot of different aspects to the park, most of them physical. Basically, we want to weave sustainable infrastructure throughout the park to address existing conditions, concerns, and opportunities, including the designs of the roadways, pathways, stormwater management, and water quality. Looking at the existing parking lots, accessibility, wildlife habitats, land protection, safety, and climate resilience. Next slide. Goal number 2 is really about upgrading the user experience. And so it addresses items like amenities and attractions, facilities, waste management, signage and wayfinding, and public safety. This goal helps to meet essential human needs, support and improve community health, and create a better user experience for everybody. Thank you. Next slide. And then third is to really expand community opportunities and provide opportunities to support and improve community connections through a diverse program, including holding events at the park, providing opportunities for volunteering, training, and also educational opportunities. Next slide. As part of this, as part of the master plan, as Rachel and Joanne described earlier, we worked with the Conway School, which really has a very unique program. It focuses on sustainable landscape design. And so we worked with them to produce concept designs for a number of different areas, including the Parkway, the Oak Street parking lot, the Tower Hill parking lot, we're calling Waldo Lake Beach, and also the amphitheater area. So we're going to go through a number of these designs now. Thanks. Next slide.
All right, great. I'm going to jump back in for this last slide. I think actually just going back real quick, one thing I wanted to make sure everybody understands for these designs coming out of Conway, and that we will continue to reiterate, is that these are concept designs. So before moving forward with any implementation, we would need to go through further engineering and design to get them into a final design format. So from all of this work that we've done, we have put forward 13 projects in this master plan. Some are site specific and some are park-wide capital improvement projects. And today we're going to go through each of those projects and give you a high-level overview and allow everybody here to rank whether they feel that those projects are a high, a medium, or a low priority based on just your experience with the park and your opinions. What we have put forward in this master plan as well under the funding section is you'll see that we propose a funding committee we put together, and that committee would meet regularly to be seeking those state, federal, and private grants to fund more design work and implementation over the next 10 years for these projects. So your input today is going to help us prioritize projects that we should be seeking funding for, and all of the public input will be reviewed during future planning of those designs as well. So before we move into the designs, does anybody have any questions about what we just covered? And you can feel free to either raise your hand or just pop off of mute if you have a question. I'm not seeing any. Great. Let's move into the designs then, the implementation.
All right, so as Rachel mentioned, that these are concepts, and so they include a lot of different strategies and goals for each of these areas, but final design would need to be pursued. And that'll happen once we receive some type of prioritization and funding for each of these projects. The first project is really the improvement of the Oak Street parking area. This is really the entrance to this section of the park. It's very busy right now. It includes the parking lot is almost always full, and basically this design is to improve not only the parking lot but the areas around it, provide areas that are can collect water and treat it, infiltrate it into the ground before it reaches Waldo Lake. You can see here on this graphic show a lot of paths connecting the parking lot to the sidewalk on Oak Street, and also providing some lawn areas and picnic areas for gatherings. Next slide.
So we're actually going to do a poll for each slide. So you're not having to rank these projects against each other. Simply, if you would rate this Oak Street, funding and implementing a redesign of the Oak Street parking area as a high, and medium, or a low priority. So everybody should see that poll up on their screen right now. And if you're a presenter, you could just exit out of it instead of participating. Okay. So it looks like everybody ranked Oak Street as a high priority, at least in this meeting. So that is good to know. Thank you for your input. We'll go to the next slide.
Okay, the second project is referred to as the Tower Hill parking lot. And this is kind of as you meander through the park, up the parkway, past the tower. This area is on the left-hand side. Right now, it's a large paved area that is used occasionally for things like the kids' road races and so forth, and Tower Fest. But in general, it is not highly utilized. So what this concept involves is refurbishing it, realigning it, providing for more efficient parking, providing more stormwater management facilities, and also some areas for lawn and just places for passive, I guess, passive activities. That's really it. I think the number of spaces goes down. It's probably cut by 1/2, but as you can see, a lot more green space, and that is a sustainability and green infrastructure strategy.
Can I ask just a quick question before we go on to the slides? Because ranking wise,
Yeah.
is
Go
it
ahead.
possible that they can all be a high priority? I guess I'm just trying to get a little bit of some, if we're doing a comparison to each of the different phases.
So for this activity, you can rank them all high priority if you want to. The activity for the in-person meeting next week is going to be a little bit different, where you'll be ranking them against each other.
Okay,
But yeah, you can feel free to rank them however you'd like today.
thank you.
And I should have asked too before launching the poll if anybody had questions about this project. All right, so we will launch the poll for Tower Hill. All right, so it looks like we have 3 people voting today because everybody else is, a part of one of the organizations presenting. So we have 2 high priority and 1 medium priority for this poll. And we can go on to the next slide.
So the next area is on the other side of the park. it is, we define it as Waldo Lake Beach. Currently, this is a parking area and a quasi-sitting area with some park benches, but it definitely needs a little bit of help. It includes right now it's has some gravel areas, and there's that experience some type of stormwater runoff and sediment into Waldo Lake. And what this concept includes is basically providing a more landscape friendly, environmentally friendly environment along Waldo Lake Beach, realigning the parkway, providing more formal parking, and providing areas for sitting, for picnicking, for walking. Again, this is to improve environmental, discharge of stormwater into the pond, and improve installing green stormwater infrastructure, and also adding additional signage.
And with this design, we do have two concept designs from the Conway School that prioritize different kind of aspects, which you can see full, explanations of in the master plan. But the top picture here shows a little bit of the boardwalk concept, which is a little bit more environmentally friendly and reduces the parking significantly, versus the promenade concept down at the bottom, which includes like more parking, more picnic tables, and more recreational opportunities. So again, they're just concepts, but we didn't want to pick just one to put forward when we were working with Conway, so we do have two for this area. Does anybody have questions? Okay, we'll launch the poll. All right, so similar to Tower Hill, we have 2 for high priority and 1 for medium.
So the fourth area is really we're referring to as the amphitheater. This is actually an earthen dam that is created by the Parkway, and it also has a water control structure that is part of the amphitheater. You can see that in the lower slide, the concrete structure sitting in the middle of the oval shape, which forms the amphitheater. This area is very complicated for a number of different reasons. There are safety concerns for this area. It does draw a lot of activity because of its uniqueness, and folks like to fish, and some folks may swim there. But it is, like I said, it is complicated because you do have some significant water flowing through this area, and it is regulated differently because it is considered a dam. So the goal here is to really make this a little bit more safe, but also more user-friendly, and a place that folks can safely enjoy this unique area. The concepts that we have here include a number of decks, bridges, and other items that could create some permitting challenges, but could result in a significant improvement for this area.
Are there any questions?
I actually have just a couple,
Yes, go ahead.
Rachel. So the parking spaces, so I know it right now, it's dirt. I don't know exactly, I think it may be like 4 cars that may be allowed now to park. Does that mean taking some things further away? Anyway, can we talk a little bit about that? And then I also know that trail going up to Tower Hill, in the improvements to that.
So the goal is really to, right now, parking out there is informal, and folks basically just kind of park on the edge of the parkway, and the goal is to provide a more formal parking space, like everything that's within the park or within these different areas. We want to improve walkability. So these concepts they include walking paths to other areas along the parkway, but to other focus areas, including Tower Hill. So again, this is a concept. These are just ideas that we want to incorporate into final design. But this is definitely an interesting area.
All right, Debbie, you know what, we'll get back. Debbie had a question in the chat about Waldo Lake, so I'm gonna do the poll for this and then see if we can go back and address Debbie's question on the last slide here. And then also, Mary, that walkway that you were just referencing, we're actually gonna talk about that walkway next as well, so.
Thank you.
We have plans for that. Just waiting on one more response in the poll there. And if it doesn't come through, we can move on. Okay, so we have 2 for high priority. And those are the only 2 coming through right now. So I'm going to end this poll.
I think we
And
had some
then,
comments in the chat.
yeah,
Rachel.
so Debbie was having trouble unmuting, so she put a comment into the chat. So we can go back to the Waldo Lake Beach design. Debbie was commenting that she doesn't like the idea of moving the parking, which both of these designs do move the parking to the other side of the road. She said, when I drive through, I want to be able to see the lake, not parked cars. So can't they design it so driving through you can see the lake?
I mean, that's definitely a consideration. So these are just concepts for feedback, and that's good feedback. So definitely think about that.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Debbie. All right, so let's move on to the paved Waldo Lake pathway.
Rachel, I think Patrick had his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Patrick. Do you want me to go back?
Yeah, no, now that I've seen Debbie's comment, I would definitely put on the table that, yeah, I think there's been a social cultural thing of people coming to the park in their cars, not really using the park as maybe we would see people normally use parks for. And so I would say, yeah, I think maybe the idea of not just thinking the idea of parking and looking at the park from a car, but more like the parkway should be more of the I don't know how to say it. Sorry, I'm just negativizing the idea, and I hate to do that to you, but yeah, I think it's not the idea of people parking and looking at the park. It's about getting out of the car and using the park. Because I think there's been an issue with people, especially I've seen numerous times, just coming in, sitting there, using the park in their car, and then dumping their trash and then leaving, and they're not really using the park. So I think we'd have to minimize that type of parking, where it's about just parking and seeing a beauty spot, where I'd rather have those spots reserved for people outside their cars walking and stuff, to minimize that kind of behavior that I've witnessed.
Yeah,
That's
thanks for sharing that. Is there anything else about Waldo Lake? Waldo Lake Beach, sorry. Waldo Lake is
There's another comment from Debbie here, Rachel. She says, and she's asking what is happening to the areas to the left and right, where there are areas that used to have places to barbecue and picnic tables.
So I believe those designs are just to the north of that area that you're referring to, with the old barbecue pits that are still sitting there. I believe, like, if you look at the top design here, that area is just to the south, so it hasn't been redesigned. It's not included in this.
These are just a couple images from a number of designs that were done by the Conway School. And again, these are just, like I said, these are just images and ideas. So as we move into design, when we move into design, we will definitely be selecting taking these comments into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go back to the pathway.
Okay, so, it's the comment about, getting people out of their cars. There are some paths, there are some formal paths, and there are some, informal paths, throughout the park. There's an existing paved path that kind of runs parallel to the parkway. It definitely needs some work, and also, both to be more accessible, but just to be more passable. So, this concept here kind of talks about and it envisions, improving those pathways, providing them more so that they're more accessible and providing more equitable access, throughout. It also includes implementing and incorporating some stormwater, management facilities. Right now, there's not a lot of, stormwater treatment along either the parkway or along the pathways, and the goal is to, incorporate those into any designs that, affiliated with this area.
All right, so that's this yellow line shown here on the map, starting back where we had looked at the amphitheater before and ending up just before South Street. So we'll launch that poll for you all.
And Rachel, while folks are answering that, I just wanted to read in here that Debbie has also said that she does see parked cars that are also empty with kids and people feeding the ducks. So they do get out of their cars as well, often she sees.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. That's a popular duck feeding area, popular area overall. All right, so this, we still only have 2 people voting in here. So 10 more seconds to vote on this poll. And then Debbie had a question about the amphitheater.
I didn't get my poll.
Oh, you didn't get it?
Yeah.
I don't know how to launch it for an individual person. I can end it and then I can relaunch it.
Well, I guess I'll just point back to Mary's sentiment earlier on all this. It's going to be high priority for me. So,
All right.
and then when it comes to, hey, where do you spend the money on what project first, then that can be another conversation. But it's all high priority. The whole park is. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll end that poll and then just quickly to address Debbie's question back here. She'd asked to the right, why do they close off the area? I'm not sure I understand the question. Oh, maybe the access right here. There's some boulders. And I believe from memory that the boulders here were to prevent folks from walking into the water. There's no swimming here, but would allow access for, like, the fire department does safety drills, as well as shoreline fishing, which would be, there'd be multiple areas for shoreline fishing in this design. So I hope that answers your question, Debbie. All right. All right, I believe this one's.
So one of the things I just want to mention is that,
Yeah.
the park was envisioned and designed as a driving park. And, decades ago. And so there's a little bit of tension between maintaining the original intent of the park, along with providing for some more active walking and, hiking activities and other activities there. And when you're out there, and we've spent a lot of time out there, you can see people in their cars, you can see people walking, riding their bikes, driving, running. So the goal, the overall goal is really to embrace both of those or all of those activities. And this nature trail is envisioned to for hikers only. There is an informal bridge that you can see that is on the slide in the upper right-hand corner of the slide. Create a more formal trail that's, you know, roughly 1/4 of a mile long. Improve the bridge and make this area more accessible so that folks have the opportunity to go on a small little hike with some picnic areas and some benches that are at the end of the peninsula there.
And I'll just mention that we are hoping to actually do some work on this bridge with our green team this summer in partnership with the Parks Department. So this could be something that happens sooner rather than later. That doesn't mean that, you know, this trail shouldn't be kept in mind and that accessibility couldn't be improved in other ways in the future. So I'll launch that poll.
And Rachel, Patrick has his hands up.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't always see that. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just say this trail's really quite amazing. It really is. Walking it, you really get a sense that it adds a whole other dynamic to the park beyond the usual driving paths and the more circumferent walking paths. This adds a whole other aspect of the park that, you know, really that feels like you're in a whole different place than DW. So this to me can add a whole new dynamic to the park, which to me it adds so much more than just what we already have. So this is a great idea. And that bridge, I've talked to Tim Carpenter in the park department, the park association. We've got funds and some wood already purchased to help out that stuff. And I don't understand why we don't keep being asked to be part of that project or be put on that table. So yeah, we'd love to be part of that this summer.
So you're okay. I didn't realize that. I'll circle back with our green team coordinator and Tim on that one. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
All right, and then we were just trying to help Debbie unmute. So Debbie, I did a little ask to unmute, like I requested for you to unmute. I don't know if that's going to pop up for you and maybe help because I know you're really wanting to be able to verbally participate.
The only other suggestion I might have is for Debbie to log off and log back on. Sometimes that allows for access.
Yeah.
And we can wait till she comes to log back on.
Debbie, you can also always set up. Sorry, I'm having trouble today. You can always send an email through the website as well, and you know, a member of the team would be happy to chat to you further about any of this stuff as well too, anytime. So,
yeah, absolutely. Debbie, to answer your question in the chat right now, the bridge is. Debbie said she's not sure exactly where the bridge is. And what we've tried to do is we put a new sign up there. So we are trying to make this area a little bit more visible. And when there is a new bridge, hopefully even more visible. But this is just south of this causeway here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but the causeway on that cuts Waldo Lake from north to south. This is just to the south of that, right off of that same green lawn area that you would use to get to the causeway. All
Rachel,
right.
I just want to read into the record too. Mary left a comment too that from a social justice perspective, for some residents, their cars are the only way to get to the park, and in some cases, it is their home. So she feels that this perspective needs to be kept in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you, Mary. All right. And thank you, Scott. I think the next one I was going to talk about, this is a big one. So the DW Phil Parkway, as I'm sure you all know, circumnavigates the park. So it's the primary amenity for both recreation and transportation. So due to that heavy use, the parkway experiences from motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists. We are putting forward that we recommend the parkway be modified to incorporate a shared use design, as well as green infrastructure, which would treat and collect stormwater. The way that this could go, as far as a shared use design for a roadway such as this, which is unique and different from, you know, a roadway out in downtown, for example, could go a number of different ways. So we have a couple of concepts from the Conway School that they put forward, in this top one, which is more of a shoreline protection concept. You have walkers on the left, you have a swale in between a walking path and a road, and then the road is shared by vehicles and bicyclists. So that's just one concept of many that could be considered. And this other one that the Conway students did, we had a little bit of an elevation. So the walkers and the bikers could share a pathway, and then the bikes could also be up on the road with the cars. And you had a wider separation between that walking and biking path and the roadway. So again, lots of different design opportunities here. And we could, you know, we could probably go on for a long time about the many different design opportunities for the roadway. But overall, what we're proposing is just to put forward that we would like to redesign the roadway and improve it for multi-use. So are there any questions about that before I launch the poll? Great. Launching the poll.
Rachel, Debbie is also asking if kayaking would ever be allowed.
Thank you. I'm just seeing that. So right now, the city does not allow any water access, so swimming, boating, anything like that. We did put it into the survey, and it was ranked as a lower priority, but I think it's something we need to keep in mind, as you know, rules and regulations can be changed in the future. So if that's something you would really want to see happen, I would encourage you to continue to come to public meetings, maybe write that in. You know, we have this comment from you today, and continue to advocate for that so that we can see if it's something the community really wants.
Yeah, if I just add, you know, kayaking, boating, non-motorized, that was all happening, you know, maybe 6-7 years ago. I kayaked a lot at the parks and did a lot of research. And so that's just an easy regulation that can be changed for the park commission. Yeah.
Right.
Rachel, Debbie is also adding she was hoping the walkway and bikeway would be elevated to prevent cars from parking and making it almost impossible to get by.
Okay. Yeah, so the different elevations can be design considerations. You can kind of see in the bottom design, the roadway is elevated more so above the walking and biking path than in the top design. So that can definitely be a strategy for separating different uses and also for stormwater management.
And Kyla also has her hand raised.
Go ahead, Kyla.
Yeah, so I just had a question about widening the vegetated buffer. Would that block any of the view of the pond at that point? And would it be a kind of progressive fill-in where it would just be like grasses, or are those trees that are pictured kind of going in at the same time once this is established?
No, that's a great question. I would say nothing in these designs are really like plant specific. So we're putting forward just the existence of the vegetated buffer, and then how that would look would be further designed out. Something that we've talked about in the goals too overall is like stabilizing the shoreline and adding more native vegetation. So we would be looking at plants that are native to the area that need less care and are better for the environment. Scott, did you have a better way to answer that question?
Well, the first, with regards to the first question, you know, the whole goal is to separate pedestrians from vehicles, and that's what we have there. And there's also, you know, these are just concepts. There are also concepts that include a shared use path, which is for biking and for pedestrians as well, which would be separated from cars. So that would kind of eliminate the dynamic of cars parking on the side of the road and not letting people go by. With regards to plantings, that's something that needs to be further developed. And I think it really becomes site specific. I mean, the conditions at every, along the parkway change. And so you usually start with a desired cross-section, but understand that that cross-section may change along the parkway as conditions change as well. So there may be some trees we want to save, and there may be some trees that we want to plant, and there may be some areas where we don't have any trees.
All right, and the poll, everybody ranked that as a high priority, which we expected. We've done a lot of outreach and we continue to hear about how important the roadway is, and whatever anyone's opinion, lots of different opinions on that, but just the roadway in general needing some attention is definitely on our radar. All right, so this is a park-wide implementation project that we put forward, is just to generally expand trail systems in and around the park. The park abuts conservation land managed by the City of Brockton's Water Commission, as well as 30 acres of forested land that was just last year acquired by the town of Avon. So these sites may be suitable for trail network connections where folks can technically leave the park but still be on like a wooded trail and take kind of a hike. It could connect to external trailheads, schools, and residential areas to make access into the park by foot more accessible. So just this past summer, a trail feasibility study was done as part of the planning for the northern section of the park. And so we are putting forward that just options for trail design and implementation should continue to be explored and pursued. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, we've got the Park Association's got a pilot program going right now that I think I showed you, Rachel, last year around where it butts the park. And this would be great to add that pilot project into your research and stuff, because that connects the neighborhoods that you're wanting to try to do, and schools and all that.
Yes, and Sarah and the Wayne, who was leading this trail feasibility study, were in touch during that. And so that is incorporated into the study. Which
You're saying trail network connections to extend external trailheads, schools, and residential areas. We've got this pilot program going already over in this neighborhood near the Raymond School that have pictures that you can use that would actually show what you're trying to do.
Yes, so I believe that was included in this report, what you guys are doing. Because we had Sarah, Sergey, and Wayne were in touch about that, and she was providing him with some
Oh,
maps.
excellent, great, excellent, great.
Yeah. And I can share that study with you as well, Patrick.
It's on the website, Rachel, isn't it?
I was just like second guessing that in my head. Is it
Maybe.
on the
Okay.
website?
We'll check.
Thank you.
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll launch the poll for expanding trail systems. And we have high priority. All right. All right, so for waste management, we had waste management.
I got it on.
Hey, Debbie.
So I missed a lot.
I
So
didn't-
sorry.
Yeah, no worries. This is all being recorded too, so you can go back and watch. But it is 12:55, so I'm going to keep going through the projects. So for the waste management plan, what we want to do is propose various ways to reduce litter and dumping throughout the park. And this is another one of those park-wide projects. So the waste management report that we created is included as an appendix of this plan, and the recommendations from that report include adding waste barrels, designing multilingual signage, establishing a volunteer litter cleanup program, and introducing recycling in a phased manner over time. So what we're recommending is that we work to gradually implement these strategies and incorporate them into the site-specific plans as we begin the implementation. Are there any questions about that? We'll launch that poll. And thank you to my co-hosts who are helping me see who has hands up and stuff. I can't always see everybody at the same time, so. All right, we got more votes for high priority for implementing the waste management plan. Thank you. And we will move on to Joanne. You were going to talk about these next slides.
Yes. So Scott gave an overview of probably the most expensive projects proposed for the park. Rachel's are a little bit more attainable. The ones that I'm going to go through are probably the easiest sort of low-hanging fruit that we'll be considering over the coming years. So the first one is something that we heard a lot in the community survey about, and that is making access to the park consistent. So the gate does not always open at the same times and close at the same times. So the proposal here is to install an automated gate system. Also, we heard in the community survey that there are concerns around safety in the park. Most of them do have to do with pedestrian and vehicle safety related issues. But the installation of other safety features like a blue light system, which you often see in large parks, improved lighting, and also better wayfinding, so better markers and signage for how to get around the park, are also part of this implementation goal here as well too.
No questions, but I think Joanne, you've raised a really great comment that we're hearing more and more throughout the park. And so I'm glad that this piece is in there because it's pretty relevant and becoming more relevant.
I am on mute. Sorry. All right, so that poll is launched and we have 3 votes for high priority. All right, move on to the next one.
So this project is a water quality monitoring project. Some of you may have noticed parts of this area of the park, the water bodies being grown over. In some cases that's natural, in other cases that is because of nutrients and other sort of contaminants entering the water and causing overgrowth. So the goal with this project is to establish a water quality monitoring program so we can ensure healthy waters in the park. And that includes effects of stormwater runoff as well, and improving some of the shoreline as well. So this would be to be determined, but we're hoping that this would be a collaborative community effort with students, perhaps from Massasoit Community College and or from Bridgewater State University involved. And it would be ongoing. So we would be able to start with a baseline 1 year and then continue to monitor the health of the water over the years to come.
Oh, that sounds good.
All right, so I'm going to launch that poll and also open it up to any questions while you all are prioritizing that. All right, 3 votes for high priority. Next.
All right. So
Oh,
this
sorry,
one,
Debbie's got a hand up.
Now that I can talk, can we volunteer for any of these projects? Like, she was just saying about water quality. So, you know, I live so close to this place. It would be easy for me to go up and take samples and, you know, deliver them wherever. Who's going to do that monitoring?
we're working on figuring out a plan for that, Debbie, but certainly Rachel will make a note. I would recommend both getting in touch with Patrick, who is president of the Park Association, as well as with Rachel, and you'll get added to both lists, and we'll definitely be in touch about opportunities for that and other things as well too.
Well, because I did the drive around with the hotspots.
Mm-hmm.
I did that.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for
Mhm.
participating in that.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. I also told a friend of mine who lives in Wisconsin about it. And she said, wow, that's a great idea. I'm going to have to get in touch with my town people.
Wonderful. That's great. Patrick?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's get in touch after this meeting, Debbie, and talk about setting up some type of water quality testing program that we can do as volunteers for the Park Association and give our data to people who need it.
Yeah, I mean, anything else that I did the drive around, I could do something like that.
Yeah, I did the drive around too. And I know Jones River Alliance has done some water testing. I think Mass Wildlife did some testing of Waldo Lake a few years ago. And so we can figure out what we can do. And that's a great idea. Thanks, Joanne, for suggesting that.
Sure.
All right, so this next project focuses on restroom facilities. We heard a lot about that in the survey. Restrooms are also important for accessibility. So you might be able to come to the park, but you can't really stay a long time there unless you have access to a restroom. So it's about encouraging people to use the park for longer and in multiple ways as well too. There are challenges. The whole park isn't sewered. The whole park doesn't have access to running water. Installing that throughout the park would be just enormously expensive, and probably in consideration of all the other priorities that the park needs work done on, probably not going to happen within 10 years or so. But here it's looking at where do the goal of this initiative here is to look at where do we need the restrooms, where do we need accessible restrooms, and looking at opportunities for porta potties. And I know that there are different qualities of porta potties as well that are available, composting toilets and all sorts of iterations with hand washing stations and things. So this initiative would look kind of across the board at where do we need these, which ones need to be accessible, what kind should go in.
All right, so I've launched that poll and just wanted to point out too that there's been a lot of conversation while we're talking about bathrooms and talking about doing a parkway design that if there was going to be expanded facilities like sewer and water, that would need to be considered during a parkway redesign. So these two projects would potentially work in tandem. Kyla, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, with the mention of the regular cleaning of like added accessible porta potties and just porta potties in general, is there any plan in there of like hiring on more people or having a service that comes out to clean them? Like, I know that that's been a big issue too, where the porta potties that are there, they don't get cleaned as often, and I don't know like who's responsible for that. So like, are there any sort of like rough ideas about how the cleaning would go?
That would have to be worked out, I think, so typically if you rent a porta potty, you can also pay for services to have that porta potty serviced. Depending on how many are needed and where and what kind, I think that's something that would have to be looked at as part of this project. How much will it cost and whether it can come from the city budget as an ongoing maintenance priority.
Yeah,
I also just
go ahead, Joanne.
Rachel. No, go ahead. I was just going to read Mary's comment, but go ahead first.
Yes, I was going to say Mary has a comment, and then also to answer your question, Kyla, the restrooms that are here at Oak Street that are pictured are cleaned currently twice a week, and that is contracted out, is paid for by the city budget, but it's not done by city staff. Joanne, did you want to talk about Mary's comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to read it into the record. So Mary points out that it was posted on the City of Brockton's website that there is a future home of a DW Field Park Welcoming Center to be constructed at the Oak Street entrance by students from Southeastern Regional Vocational Technical High School. The city truly thanks the administration, school committee staff, and students for supporting the Welcoming Center proposal, and the city is excited to see the construction begin in September 2024. So this is right by that parking lot at the Oak Street entrance to the park. Oh, and it's a Facebook post.
Thank you. Sorry, I meant to do that. And I'm going to need to leave. I have another meeting to go to in about 5-10 minutes. Well, I'll hang on till the end, but thank you.
All right, thanks, Mary. We have one more project to talk about.
Almost done.
All right, and we had one vote for high, one for medium for priorities on that last one.
So this last project is focused on improving the signage throughout the park. So part of it is about establishing a unique and consistent branding for the park so that when you do see a sign, you recognize it as a park sign. but it's also about installing signs that are in the right places, providing the right information. So that could be information that helps you better get around the park or get to restrooms or find parking, but also educational information about plants and wildlife that you might be able to find in the park, and also rules and regulations. For example, the no swimming rule. The design of these signs would also take into account the need to be accessible also. So that means multilingual signs, that means signs that maybe have Braille on them, and other formats, so that as many people as possible can use the signage and enjoy the park.
Are there any, I have the poll launched for that. Are there any questions about signage? All right.
Yeah, just signage I think is extremely important in any design, and I'm glad you guys are dealing with this. I hate to put this on the table, but it has to be put on the table. Right now, managing the park, people don't understand the importance of how to put signs up or where to put signs up. And it's very important to have people who understand how and where and when to design a sign to be put when we do all this. So I'm very happy that you guys are in part of this process.
Thank you. Yeah, and then as far as design too, like we would be proposing to use a graphic design firm and have them be professionally designed similar to these signs depicted at Stone Farm Conservation Area. All right, so 2 for high priority, 1 for medium for that. All right, so I have one final poll. So if you could choose any of these projects that we've gone over and pick one that you would give the overall highest priority, which one would it be?
Good gosh, you do not make this easy.
Hey, boy, you said that right, Mary.
There isn't as much flexibility with Zoom polls as there are with like some activities that we could do in person. So
Why don't they just have one for street?
that is the DW Field Parkway. That's the street.
No, for paving the road. It's like
Yeah, that would be.
some spots are so many potholes, and it's like going through a minefield.
Yes, that's the DW Field Parkway. That's how it's listed on this poll. That's the name of the street there.
Parkway. Is that 1, 2, 3, or 4? DW.
Number 6.
About in the middle.
Yeah.
Oh, I can scroll up. How about that?
Number 7.
This is so hard.
So it's 13 projects to choose from. So, all right. So while you all are finishing that up, I'll just mention some next steps.
Oh.
Again, the full master plan is available on the website dwfpi.org in multiple areas. So anywhere you go on that website, you're gonna find a link to it, as well as a digital comment form. So if you want to add more comments or just share with folks that you know that couldn't make it to this meeting today, that's a great way to just comment on your own time. And we encourage you to share this with your community, friends, family, coworkers. Through August 5th is when we are collecting comments. And then just as a reminder, the final draft will be presented. That will also be available on the website in September. So we're getting close to finalizing this and wrapping this up. All right, I think we got all 3 votes in. So we have 1 vote for Oak Street, 1 vote for the Parkway, and 1 vote for the waste management plan. All right. So we're going to be able to download the results from all of these polls. We'll be able to download the chat. We have this meeting recorded so we can go back and view our discussion and use all of your feedback for implementation going forward. So thank you so much for coming today. I will officially close this down, but if anybody wants to stay on, it is 1:10. So if anybody wants to stay on and ask questions, I'll stick around for a little bit.
Oh, what happened?
This has been awesome.
Thanks, Patrick.
This has been so good. Yeah, this plan is amazing.
Thank you. We're pretty psyched about it.
It's nice to see something done about this park because it really is a nice park.
Thank you. It is.
And did you know, way back in the day, there was a place you could swim?
Yeah.
Yes.
at where the entrance is off of Oak Street, that used to be the end of Oak Street. And going from DW Fields Park to the other end where the hospital is, that is now Oak Street Extension because it never existed before. And so when you came up to where the Oak Street, the Oak Street entrance is, to the left, well, going, I don't know which direction you're going in.
Debbie, are you talking about the old Ellis Brett Pond?
It might be, because if you went to the left, I say to the left because I'm thinking if you're going towards the hospital, it would.
Yeah, it's on the backside near Pleasant Street. I think you might be thinking about the Ellis Brett Pond, which there used to be a swimming house there built. There was a beach there.
Yes, I
all
used to
overgrown
swim
now.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how old I am.
Yeah, that
Now
was on the south side of the park and was closed in, I believe, the 70s, correct me if I'm wrong, for contamination.
Yeah, I think it actually might have been before the 70. Well, wait a minute, 70, 60s.
I think people stopped swimming there in the late 50s.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I want to say that too, because my parents used to take us over there, and then all of a sudden we couldn't go, and but the beach was still there, so it was, the contamination.
When I was a child in the 70s, it was still a pond without
Yes,
and now it's just an overgrowth swamp. Yeah.
yes. So, okay, well, I wish I could go to the one on Tuesday because somebody said they were going to do a few other different questions, and of all nights, a wedding, who gets married on a Tuesday night?
Well, I'm
So-
sorry we'll miss you. It's going to be a lot of the same information
Right.
with just a different way of being able to vote on projects. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you have more comments that you want to make and you want to either email me directly, which the email address on dwfpi.org comes
Yep.
straight to me, or fill out the form online, then we'll receive those either way.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
And you probably have a recording of it?
We have a recording of this meeting. Yes.
Yeah. No, the one Tuesday night.
We're not going to record the in-person.
Oh, okay.
We don't quite have the videography and
Yeah.
microphone skill set and equipment to be doing
Okay.
that.
Gotcha.
But we'll have people will be able to write notes and we'll be able to, see their feedback.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you all so much for coming. I hope
Yep.
to see you in the future and we'll stay tuned.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.